Break Fix Podcast is all about capturing the living history of people from all over the autosphere, from wrench turners and racers to artists, authors, designers, and everything in between. Our goal is to inspire a new generation of petrol heads that wonder, how did they get that job or become that person? The road to success is paved by all of us because everyone has a story.
The Oswego Speedway, located in Oswego, New York, was built in 1951 when original owners Harry, George, and William Caruso converted the one-time Wine Creek horse track into a 3/8-mile dirt auto racing facility. The track was then paved during the 1952 season and remained a 3/8-mile track until 1961 when it was enlarged to its current 5/8-mile size. The Oswego Speedway has been a continuously run weekly racetrack since it opened in August of 1951.
And joining us tonight is Camden Proud, Public Relations Director from Oswego Speedway, to talk to us about its history, importance, and evolution in the world of motorsports, and especially Supermodified racing.
And with that, let's welcome Camden to Break Fix.
Thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to being a part of it tonight.
And joining me tonight is one of our regular co-hosts on Break Fix. You know him well. It's Mountain Man Dan, who heads up our Mountain View division, all things dirt, off-road, trucks, and bikes. So welcome back, Dan.
Good to be here. We also have a special guest with us tonight. Let's welcome back Kip Zeiter from IMRRC, who's been going to events at Oswego for over 50 years.
Well, thanks, Dan. And God, does that make me feel old?
Let's go back in time to when Kip was young and had long hair, and let's talk about the history of Oswego Speedway.
It started out as a track for horses. Do you guys know how many years horses ran on it before it got transferred over to automobiles running on it?
I do not.
No, I've actually seen maybe one picture ever of horses up here on the track, and I don't know when that started. All I know is when the Crusoes bought it in 1951, that was when the conversion started, and that was the reason that it was left dirt, because that was the easiest thing for them to do in the first season, was leave the dirt surface down, because that's what it was used for with the horses. 1952, they jumped right into asphalt racing, and that's the way it is today still. I'm
sure at that time, leaving it dirt wasn't uncommon, because in the infancy of racing back then, a lot of tracks were dirt. I'm assuming that it wasn't out of the norm for it to be a dirt track at that time.
Exactly. And what they did in 52, it took some time before the supers were brought into the speedway on a weekly basis. That was in the early 60s. So for a while, they were running A mods and B mods, kind of older coupes, things like that, that most of the dirt tracks around here, that was what was being run broadly across New York State. I think they did the easiest thing to kind of get their feet wet as track owners initially.
So who won the inaugural season at Oswego?
I know quite a few of the names back then, and one of them was John Treacy Sr., who was the father of John Treacy Jr. that still owns the track today. He raced in the first ever season here, but our records go all the way back to 1951, and we do a good job updating those. It's always fun to take a trip down memory lane.
Camden, you came to Oswego way later than Kip did, but Kip, you also came in during the Asphalt generation. So do you know of a time, or were you aware of when Oswego was run as a dirt circuit?
Yeah, but only from the history books. I mean, it was only a dirt track for the first year, and then it's been paved ever since. And not to fast forward the story, because I'm sure we'll get into it, the interesting thing, and Cameron can talk about this, after Oswego's normal season is over with the International Classic Labor Day weekend, it becomes a dirt track again for Super Dirt Week. The whole years I've been there, apart from going to Super Dirt Week every year, it's asphalt. Keep in mind that back in those days, there were probably more dirt tracks, as you point out, but it was easier to convert and run a dirt track one night and an asphalt track the next. The first Super Dirt Week, which was held on the Syracuse Mile, 1 mile dirt track in 1972, I think. The guy that qualified third was Jerry Cook, who was a multi-time NASCAR asphalt modified champion. Basically, all you did in those days was switch tires. So it was easy to convert back and forth. Obviously, over the years, it's become much more specialized, and now a dirt car is a dirt car, and an asphalt car is an asphalt car. So there's not that changeover that there used to be in the early days.
But that's a changeover in the car. But as you mentioned, the changeover of the track surface itself has got to be pretty difficult. That's not as easy as just changing tires on your car. So how do you bring in the dirt? How do you change the surface of the track? Does it mess up the asphalt? I've heard it happen a couple of years ago. They did that at Bristol. They were going to run NASCARs on the dirt surface. You guys are used to doing this, but how does that play out?
They did do NASCAR on the dirt at Bristol for a few years, and basically same type of process here. They just truck in loads and loads of clay. Some of it is stored right behind the turn 2 wall here, and it kind of just sits there all winter, and track crew crew with Dirt Car does a phenomenal job getting the surface in shape every year. Not an easy task. The place is pretty beat after every Super Dirt Week, and we've had to patch certain sections of the asphalt and repair the walls, paint, and just give the place a little love every year after Super Dirt Week, usually more than that what would be required. But it's a great event, and it's honestly helped a lot to put this track on the map even more than it already was with the Supermodifieds.
Yeah, imagine cleanup afterwards is an undertaking in itself, because asphalt, you might get some debris from the tires and rubber kicking up to the sides, but dirt, they go out and have to wet it down or something so it doesn't get too dry. So it's coating the walls with mud and everything, and then kicking it up into the stands as well. So I'm sure it's a very interesting mess to clean up when it's done with.
It is. We have a really hard-working maintenance crew, and they do a great job. And I actually just walked the track. It's the best that it's looked after Super Dirt Week that I can remember, and they've been doing it since 2016 here. So I think we have a couple spots to patch, but the surface is in surprisingly good shape this year. It's just a lot of mud and all sorts of fun stuff to clean up.
I think one of the pluses of Super Dirt Week coming to Oswego, Super Dirt Week ran on the Syracuse Mile from, I think, 1972 to 2015, and then goofy politicians wanted to get rid of it, extend the midway and all that stuff, which still pains me. But they wanted to keep the event in upstate New York, but Oswego was the only track that really had seating capacity anywhere close to what Syracuse held. So they moved it to Oswego. There was a huge influx of money associated with it. And with that, they were able to basically get the rear grandstand, which was getting pretty shabby in a lot of sections. They basically redid the entire rear grandstand completely, made a lot of other, improvements to the track. So the fact that you've got dirt money helping to keep the asphalt track alive and in fact increase a lot of the facilities, I think is kind of interesting. And we'd never seen Oswego as dirt, obviously. So the first time they announced Super Dirt Week was moving to Oswego, it's like, oh my gosh, we got to be there to see that. You already talked about putting the surface down, but it is a real science to keep a dirt track drivable regardless. But it's even more of a science to put dirt down on an asphalt track and basically have a month before you're going to run your big race, and so much is contingent on Mother Nature and all of that stuff. But they've done a remarkably good job most of the years in making it a very good competitive race. But a lot of money came in with that, and to their credit, I think they used it to improve the whole facility, which is a good thing.
So as Oswego has evolved and more high-profile events have happened there, Dirt Week happens, all these kinds of things, how has the track evolved? What has changed from a safety perspective? What has changed about the facilities itself?
Just like the whole of motorsports, the Speedway is always working hard to improve the safety of the cars. And of course, the foam blocks that started at Lancaster back in the 90s have been here ever since also. And we have a phenomenal track safety crew, in my opinion, best in the country. Of course, I'm biased, but there's been accidents, fires, things like that have happened here that I firmly believe if they happen anywhere else, short track wise, be looking at a different outcome. Our track safety crew consists of EMTs, Oswego firefighters. They're a really great group of guys, and I wouldn't want to race anywhere else on a weekly basis for that reason. And great tech crew as well, safety officials, very thorough, doing everything they can to continue to evolve these race cars. And as the speeds get higher, I think we improve our safety as well.
Original owners, like what brought the opportunity for the current owners to buy it from the original owners that bought it and converted it from a horse track to a car track?
Yeah, the Crusoe family owned it for a while, and then it was Pat Furlong and Steve Gioia. Pat being the father of Greg Furlong, who's won 6 classics here, one of the most successful drivers of all time. And Steve Gioia is one of the most successful drivers of all time here in his own right. So the Treacy's, same deal. They've been involved in racing here for the longest time, with Johnny and Eric's father being one of the original competitors here. Johnny and Eric both race supers themselves. And once they heard that Pat and Steve wanted to sell the track, I think it was 2009 or 10. They're great businessmen. They're into farming, trucking. They have a new concrete business. The opportunity presented itself and they took advantage of it. And when they first bought this place, they've put a lot of improvements into it, and I'm certainly very appreciative of all they've done to keep the place alive.
That tells me the fact that they've raced there and everything. Buying it wasn't just some purchase to make. They had their heart was in it when they did that. So that's awesome knowing the owners of it are into it.
Exactly. As long as the Treacy's own it, this track will not ever be anything other than a weekly super modified venue, and kind of puts my mind at ease. Their hearts are very much invested into super modified racing and the history of this place, and just preserving that for years to come.
That's awesome to hear.
So on another episode, we heard tidbits of the Oswego history through Roy Sova, who's been the voice of Oswego for many years. And we're going to talk about him a little bit more as we go along. Oswego has this nickname, the Steel Palace, but it's also had a reputation over its long history of being one of the most violent tracks around. And even Roy said that during his interview. That's due in part to the steel walls that surround the circuit. So you mentioned some of the safety changes, but for those of us that are unfamiliar with that, can you kind of expand upon more about what that means and how Oswego has broken its reputation for being a violent track?
I still think it can be very violent. It's still steel walls down the straightaways. And once you get past the foam, I know all too well the feeling of hitting the steel, and it's not pleasant. It doesn't move, I can tell you that. I think it's more so the evolution in the race cars, seats, seat belts, Hans devices, the way the cars are built to withstand a wreck like that and impact like that. So steel walls haven't gone anywhere. I just think the cars have become that much stronger and that much safer.
So how does Oswego compare to other tracks? How are some other short tracks built? Are they using steel as well? Are they using cement? Do they have some sort of Armco, something else?
Depends on where you go. There's some tracks that Supermodifieds race at out in New England that have only walls on the straightaway and just grass embankments in the corners. There's Evans Mills. We go and race our small black car up there, and that's no walls in the corners, but concrete down the straightaways. So it really depends. Shangri-La 2, for example, which is reopening, has concrete walls all the way around, but foam in the corners. Yeah, it depends on where you go, but the vast majority of short tracks don't have a NASCAR safer barrier. It's primarily concrete or steel.
With Oswego, what sort of banking do you guys have at the track there?
We've always just referred to it as semi-banked. It depends on who you ask what the angle of the banking is degree-wise, but semi-banked is probably the best way to describe it. There's a big debate on how long the track is, too. We call it a 5/8. If you walk one way, it's a half. If you walk around the outside of the track, it's the 5/8 mile. So it's a debate between all of us Oswegonians up here, I guess.
So we mentioned Super Dirt Week. Are there any other significant events or events that people should recognize that are being held as we go throughout the year? You know, we said in the intro, weekly events. The track is always busy. How many events a year does the track hold?
We're going to have 12 race weekends in 2024. It isn't what it used to be as far as the number of events, but I think what's really cool about Oswego now is that every weekend is a special event, so to speak. We have the Classic in September, Labor Day weekend, 68th season this year. Something I think is really cool is we're having what we're calling the Stock Car Spectacular on Friday night. That's the Dave London Memorial for the Super Stocks, and then the New York State Compacts. On Saturday, we do Modified Madness with the NASCAR Wheel and Modified Tour and the XMR Sportsman Modifieds. And then on Sunday is Super Sunday, and we have the big block Oswego Super Modifieds, the SBS Small Block Super Modifieds, and then the Wayne 350 Small Block Super Modifieds. So if you don't want to hang out all weekend, if you only, like one of those divisions, one of those days you favor more than another, I think we have something for everybody variety-wise on Classic Weekend.
Coming from two different, let's say, generations of Oswego, Camden and Kip, can you guys agree on who the greatest of all time to turn laps at Oswego is?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, how about top three?
Well, okay, so I'll take a shot at this first. And again, keep in mind, I'm viewing this from the grandstand. Now, in recent years, Camden's viewing it from behind the steering wheel. So that may temper our feelings a little bit. But I guess I would say probably Jimmy Champagne, the great Bentley Warren, who I'm, little plug here, I'm desperately hoping to have at the center a little bit later on this year with one of the more iconic cars that ever raced at Oswego. And from a longevity standpoint, and Cam may agree with me on this, I would say there's a fellow named Joe Gosick. Joe's been running at Oswego Speedway for 40 years, and he's still getting it done. Those might be my top three.
I would agree with you statistically wise, at least on Jim Champagne and Bentley Warren. I think you have to say Jimmy's the best ever. Obviously, I never got to see him race. And when I started coming here, Bentley was towards the end of his career, right? So I know statistically they're far and away ahead of everybody else. And then I've always said from 3 to 10 or whatever, if you're ranking drivers, it's kind of an open debate. Eddie Bellinger Jr. sits at 52 wins. Joe Gosick has 45 and is still racing and competitive enough to win today. Otto Sitterly with 44. Nolan Swift with 41, Greg Furlon with 36, Doug Hevron and Doug Didero at 33, and Mike Ordway at 30. And that's just your top 10. There's guys today that are still racing right now. Your Michael Barnes, Dave Danzers, people like that who I think will continue to expand on their accomplishments so far. Dave just winning the International Classic for the first time this past season, and then went out and won the big open wheel showdown in Las Vegas. So I'm big on the history here, and it'll be interesting to see how the record books change here in the seasons to come.
So other than drivers that you guys have raced there on a regular basis, Are there any like NASCAR or Indy drivers that have come out there to run the track?
Mario Andretti raced here back in the 60s in a USAC sprint car, which is pretty neat. We had Mark Martin come and run here in ASA competition back in the mid 80s. And there's also a super cool YouTube video where Darrell Waltrip got behind the wheel of one of the Bowley Flying 5 Supers and did an exhibition lap with Bentley Warren. More recently, I think in 2011 or 12, we had Casey Kane come in and do an exhibition with Otto Sitterly in one of the Nicotra Supers. So there's been a lot of NASCAR, IndyCar guys that have come out. And one of the coolest parts about the history of this place is that it's sort of bridged the gap for some of these short track open wheel guys like Joe Gozick, Doug Didero, Bentley Warren have all gone out and raced Indianapolis and been successful in IndyCar competition. So another reason they call it the Indy of the East.
You've already mentioned a couple of different car types in here. But first, Camden, tell us about your superhero origin story and how you got into motorsports.
Well, I definitely have to thank my dad for that. He was racing supers in his rookie year, actually, the year I was born, back in 1998, and continued to race Supermodifieds through 2002. And then as soon as he sort of semi-retired, I got in a quarter midget, ran that for a while, and first thing I wanted to do when I graduated to a full-size car was get up racing here at Oswego.
And Kip, what about you? How did you get tied up in Oswego?
I've never been an actual racer, but I've been a race fan my entire life. We really started out at Shangri-La Speedway in Oswego, New York, not to confuse the two, but watching weekly Asphalt modified races, the greats like Richie Evans and Dutch Hogue and Jerry Cook and Jeff Bodine. Shangri-La was every Saturday night for us for a couple of years, and then we discovered Oswego Speedway. And I remember the first time we went up there, we were sitting at the McDonald's, which is right at the entrance of International Drive. This is back when nobody had an enclosed trailer. Everything was out in the open, and most of the Oswego Supers were cut down Indy Roadster cars. So we're sitting at McDonald's and we see Todd Gibson in the Flintstone Flyer from Ohio tow in, go by, headed up to the track, and we all looked at each other and said, oh my goodness, is that what a super looks like? And from then on, we were hooked. And that was probably in the very late 60s, early 70s. I've just been a fan ever since.
Kind of interesting how oval track racing is different in different parts of the country. New England versus the Southeast versus out in California and things like that. And so for us here in what we would consider the DMV or the Mid-Atlantic, I think we're most familiar with late models or World of Outlaws cars, right? The sprint cars. So you mentioned Supermodified, and there's actually a news article from a couple of years ago where Proud Motorsports, your last name, you guys purchased the Supermodified operation at Oswego. So I wanted to pull that apart, first talking about the different types of cars, but also talking about how do you buy the Supermodified operation and how does that work?
Not easily. The car we have right now is a former Doug Didero car. It was built in 2018. Doug raced it for a couple seasons and then retired. And honestly, the operation we have right now is top notch. And if it wasn't for Doug giving us such an outstanding deal on it, I wouldn't even have this opportunity. It's honestly always been my dream to race a Supermodified. And prior to that, I had run in the small block class here for 5 years, and it had always just been a lot more affordable, and I didn't really feel like I'd ever be able to move up to the Supermodified class just due to lack of funding and things like that. And we have the best financial backing between the sponsors that I've ever had, and the deal that we got from Doug to go ahead and do this really made it all possible. So they're a unique race car, fastest short track car in the world. This is the only place they're run weekly anywhere in the world. It's very special to be able to be a part of that, but it's an enormous financial undertaking too.
What is a Supermodified compared to some of these other cars? And there's different stages of Supermodifieds I've come to understand as well.
Maybe the best way to do it would sort of be explain what each class we have is here. It gets a bit confusing, but since 1992, we had what was formerly known as a limited Supermodified. Now they call it a small block Supermodified or SBS. And it's not a true Supermodified frame. It's more of like a IMCA modified frame, like on the dirt. But they've been a great feeder class here since 92. That's when my dad started in and myself as well. So that's the small block Supermodified. They're run by a Chevy 602 crate motor, independent front suspension, about 400 horsepower. Then we have the 350 Supermodified class, which just was introduced here on a weekly basis in 2019. Most of them are older, big block Supermodified frames with the big top wing over the top of the roll cage and thinner tires all the way around. Also using a Chevrolet crate engine, this one being a 604. So that's kind of one step down from the big block class. And then the big block Supermodified, about 850, 900 horsepower, 18-inch right rear tire, we're averaging about 138, 140 mile an hour laps. Average speed goes around the track 5/8 a mile in 15.3 seconds is the track record. So very fast, very powerful race car.
Doing the laps there in the 15-second range and hitting speeds like 150 mile an hour. I was reading online, they're saying you can generate up to like 4 G's of force in the turns up there. So that's a good bit of force that the drivers are feeling going into the turns on that track.
Yeah, it is. The G-force is really something. I actually wasted my first couple races in a big black super because I was uncomfortable in the seat. The G-force was throwing me around so much I couldn't even drive the car until I got more comfortable. So yeah, it's really impressive. When I get in the grandstands and sit back and look at those cars, I look at the people around me and say, I can't believe I actually do that. They're just an incredible machine.
So when you look at them in picture and you take away that sort of World of Outlaws style wing on top, they really look like a late 60s, early 70s era Formula car or Indy car. So is that about right?
Yeah, they do have very similar suspension to IndyCar and Formula One cars with the independent front now. That was illegal for a while, and then I think 2012 they allowed the independent front suspension. They are sort of like an Indy car, and we also call it the Indy of the East. That's not for nothing either.
For your listeners who really can conceptualize it, it's all open wheel stuff. It's not a closed cockpit like an Asphalt Modified. The cars are just wicked looking, sitting still, and they're even more wicked looking when they're going 140 miles an hour around the track. Big block, methanol. Every year I go there, I sit under the big covered grandstand because after about 2 laps, all that methanol fumes comes wafting up into the grandstand. And I'm telling you guys, if I get home at 1 o'clock in the morning and I still smell methanol and my ears are still ringing from the sound, it's been a good night at Oswego.
So what are they like to drive? I mean, you said 130, 140 miles an hour. Are they pretty well planted? Are you sliding them the whole time? What's the driving style like? And how do you manage a machine like this?
Just all depends on the handling of the car, obviously. And I think the track here changes so much. But right now we have more downforce in the Supermodified than we've probably ever had with the rear wing behind the roll cage. They were shovel tails for a while, just a lot of sheet metal around the roll cage. Then we moved to tail sections, which was, again, just kind of a big wing wrapped in sheet metal. And now we have the tail wing, which sort of looks like a Copper Classic Phoenix wing back on the Supers of the 90s that they had running out west. So there is a lot of downforce right now. We're going to be taking some of that away this season, actually. But they are very planted compared to what the tail section cars were when I first started racing Supers.
Kip, you have a obviously longer vantage point when it comes to super modifieds, and you've seen them change a ton over 50 years. So tell us about some of the older cars and the improvements you've seen and changes that you've witnessed.
For the longest time that we went during our early days, there was simply one class of car, and it was the Supermodified. And you'd run heats and semis and a feature, and there weren't 3 different classes of cars like there are now, which is great because it does offer a lot of variety, and I enjoy that. But there was just one class of car. So it started when we were there with the Indianapolis Roadster bodies, which were cut down and all cobbled up. The cars looked totally awesome. They got a little bit more aerodynamic. Just hearing Camden say they're going to take a little of the downforce away this year, I'm wondering how they're doing that. Are they going to make the rear wing smaller, or what they're going to do there? But we've been part of that whole evolution. And for a period of time, the rule book at Oswego was almost microscopically thin because we went through the era of actual rear engine cars. I remember one season when Jeff Bodine raced a rear engine car, and pretty successfully. Jimmy Champagne, who was probably one of the most innovative drivers and competitors ever in the history of the Speedway, was the first guy to come out with the offset approach where the engine and the drivetrain is all hung out on the left because all the car does obviously is turn left. And Jimmy made a rear engine Supermodified that was banned, I think, after one season because it was just so dominant. So we've seen the evolution of the cars, the evolution of the design of the cars, at least from those of us that sit in the stands. When they went to the fixed wing that Camden's explaining now here 4 or 5 years ago, there was mixed feelings on that because it didn't look like the traditional Supermodified that we had all become used to watching. My thought was, I don't want to be the last guy sitting in the grandstand watching the last Supermodified race at Oswego. So if this is what it takes to keep the class going, I'm all for it. It's been fun seeing that whole evolution from the Indy Roadsters to the open body work.
With these cars being so specialized, Where do the chassis come from? Where do the parts come from? If you're in the NASCAR world, everything comes out of like Mooresville, right? I mean, it's all based in one sort of area. So how does it work for Supermodifieds? Where is all this stuff coming from? Or are people still building these things in their barns and their sheds?
I'll let Kip talk about how that was back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. That's probably a better question for him more so than me. But now the cars are mass produced by Joey Hawksby at Hawk Jr. Chassis here in Oswego. But I'll let Kip jump into what it was like back in those days.
It was much, much more backyard, pull parts out of the junkyard, all that kind of stuff. I mean, when we first started Asphalt Modified spectating, I dare say that almost every car that rolled in there was built by the owner out of his garage, out of the local garage downtown, something like that. The first guy to get into mass production of asphalt modified chassis and stuff was a guy by the name of Maynard Troyer, who was one of my favorite modified drivers of all time. I had a friend who was modified racing, and depends on how you look at this, either Troyer destroyed the sport or opened it up to more people, because once Troyer came out with his cars, if you needed one of those to be competitive, and if you crashed it, you had to call Troyer and buy a front clip or a rear clip or something like that, instead of going to the local junkyard and finding parts. So racing in general, obviously, has become much more specialized, regardless of what kind of class you're talking about, be it grassroots or the top of the thing. But yeah, back in the early days, when I was there, everybody built their own car for the most part. And like Cam says, now Hawk builds all of the chassis, or at least the vast majority of the chassis that run at the Speedway in the class.
The vast majority are Hawk chassis, Joey Hawksby, and then Paul Koloka of Oswego built several extreme chassis, he calls them. There's not as many of them left racing at Oswego anymore. If you go through the field, it is mostly Hawk chassis and extreme chassis. And then there's a couple of one-off cars. Chris Osetic, who actually works at the Aerodyne Wind Tunnel down in Mooresville, North Carolina, designed and built the defending track champion Dave Schulich Jr.'s car. His brother Brian Osetic also races the team car to that. And my car was designed by Doug Didero and built by John Koloka of Oswego. So there's a couple cars that won last year that weren't Hawk chassis. Then again, every other car in the field that was victorious this past season was a Hawk car. Another one that stands out to me is the Abolds. Pat Abold still built his own piece for his son Jeff, and they've been very competitive with that car as well, winning the Classic a few years ago. And this year, winning the Sandusky Speedway High Miler Nationals, as well as the Evans Mills Classic. So there are a few home-built one-off cars that can very much still get the job done, although the Hawk chassis is taken over locally.
When people decide to build them on their own, is there like a template that's used? Because like NASCAR, for the most part, there's like the template where the outline of the car is the same no matter what the manufacturer is. Is it similar with these cars, or is it kind of more open to interpretation of the builder to design it how they want it?
A little bit of both. Obviously, there's the rule book you have to follow, and anybody can bring that up online on our website and check that out. But my car, Doug sent the blueprints of the car that he designed on a computer program, emailed them over to John Koloka, who built my car. And then John took a look at the blueprints and just kind of made that come to life from there. So it depends on the design of the car. My car actually has a tip roll cage. Not every car here has that. That's for aerodynamics. It is pretty cool that when you see these one-off cars still nowadays, the modern day interpretation of what one's own creation would look like. And I wish we could get back to more guys that have the knowledge and the resources to be able to build these cars out of their own shops, because unfortunately, I think a lot of that has to do with the price and the cost of things nowadays, that we've gotten further and further away from that.
There's the other argument to be made that that's where the real racing is. It's that ingenuity, it's that stick-to-itiveness, and it's that perseverance of somebody trying something new, or at least, in the ways of Lotus, until you get caught. So you keep pushing. In a lot of other racing, you see balance of performance, you see more spec series, and basically, as Dan said, templated chassis. And what I like about this, and what's exciting about this, is you still have room for that dark horse, and you kind of laugh at that guy going, man, he's never going to stand a chance. Hey, maybe he made his body out of baling wire and cardboard, but, he's the fastest guy on the track as long as he met the rules. And that's still, for me, that homage to classic racing, and I think that's fantastic.
Talking about the different things, video vehicles, you mentioned how independent suspension wasn't allowed for a while. That caught my attention. I was curious as to why that was. Somebody did that and the car was performing better, so it was decided that that wasn't allowed, or was it for safety reasons? What was the reason for the independent suspension not being allowed for a while?
Both, more so that some of the independent front suspension cars had advantage over some of the ones that were not. I had a straight axle car to start my super career a few years ago. I know just from experience that driving an independent front suspension car, I think that that's a lot easier, a much bigger advantage. And I don't know, there might only be one or two straight axle cars left, one of them being Jeff Abel's. So straight axle cars can work very well too. Jeff's one of the top guys, but I certainly prefer the independent, and I know a lot of other guys do as well. Again, the problem with that is it costs more money to get that installed. And I do think, unfortunately, over the last decade, it has made things even more expensive because everybody's been sort of racing over to Joey Hawksby's shop or whoever building their independent front suspension that they didn't have before. So with every upgrade or rule change comes more cost, unfortunately.
Do you think any of that comes down to like driver preference? Because you said the one guy's still running solid front axle. Because a lot of the older guys, I mean, you look back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, where that independent front suspension wasn't very common throughout various types of racing. So those guys got used to that. Like power steering wasn't an option for most of those things and stuff like that, where they had to learn how to manhandle the cars. Do you think it comes down to them? They spent so many years driving it that way, it's harder for them to adapt to the newer style.
I think that's part of it. Definitely driver preference and also just finding the right balance in your car, like any race car. The Abels struggled terribly with this car that is still a straight axle for the first few seasons they had it. I think we're ready to throw it out and just kept testing and running the track and logging laps. And they finally found the perfect balance with the straight axles. I also think it's about just building your notebook and figuring out what the answers are between balancing the aerodynamics on the front and rear of the car. That's a lot of it as well. The biggest thing is getting the car to turn smoothly. And I think the independent, it kind of tricks you because it makes you feel like your car's handling better once you switch from a straight axle to an independent car. But you also need to be able to get the car to turn and cut the corner as best as it possibly can. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both sides of that, I think.
If you've been doing short track for a long time, running Supermodifieds, and you decide, you know what, I want to do something different, where do you go from here? And I know some people take some drastic left turns, pun intended, maybe to other disciplines of motorsport. But if you want to continue along this path, where do you go from here?
For me, that's a tough question because this has always been the ceiling for me as far as what I personally would like to accomplish in racing is getting here. Back in the day, I think it would be easier for people like the guys I mentioned to catch the eye of an IndyCar owner and get themselves an opportunity at one of the top echelons in motorsports. At this point, financially, I think that's next to impossible for most of the guys who race here. So I think that pretty much every guy in the super modified class here would tell you that this is what they've always wanted to race. And this is the class for them that they've always wanted to work their way up to. There really isn't anywhere to go from here. I think everybody feels that when you're racing a super modified at Oswego Speedway, it's one of the coolest opportunities that anybody who loves racing and motorsports could ever ask for, to get behind the wheel of one of these cars.
Camden's totally on point, and he would know this better than I would. I think when I first started going to Oswego, there were competitors that would tow in on a weekly basis from Michigan and Ohio, and, all over the place. I mean, they would never call a show because of rain. We'd stay there till 1 o'clock in the morning, and they'd get the track ride and they'd run because all these guys had to tow back to Michigan and Ohio and wherever the next day. Gordon Johncock, Nolan Johncock ran there. It was a much easier progression to go from Oswego to Indy. Everything is all relative, obviously, but money has become such a factor now that you can have all the talent in the world, but unless you're bringing $500,000 with you, they're going to look at the guy standing beside you who maybe doesn't have the talent you do, but does have the $500,000 in his pocket. From Camden's standpoint, has become a bit more regionalized now. Most of the guys that run there on a weekly basis are from Oswego and upstate New York area. Classic still draws in guys like Davey Hamilton, who's run an Indy any number of different times. So it still has a draw. I totally agree with Camden that if your goal all along was to race a super modified, because it's such a unique car. They don't run these things all over the country. They run some out in the West Coast, and they run at Oswego and a couple tracks in the Midwest, but not on a regular basis. This is the pinnacle of your sport if you're a super modified racer. And I think it's a shame that I'm sure there are guys that could get it done at Indy or, other tracks like that. It's just such a money game now. It's just priced guys out, unfortunately.
And that's fair. And I think it's interesting that Supermodified was seen in the past as a feeder series into IndyCar and other disciplines, but it also makes me wonder, what's the feeder series into Supermodifieds? I know there are people out there that just sort of start in disciplines and they just full send and they go for it, but that's not usually everybody's progression path. Even in road racing, it's like, well, I started in dirt, or I started in go-karts, and then I did some autocross, and then I did some club racing, and then, you kind of worked your way up through the system. What's the system like to get into Supermodifieds?
Small block super, then the 350 super, and then you go up to the super modified, but I'll let him discuss that.
Exactly. We have a good feeder system here with the Oswego Cartway, which is right behind the big track here. And also the Oswego County Quarter Midget Club, the Syracuse Quarter Midget Club are all close by. I'm kind of looking at the point standings in the super modified class this past season, and almost every single driver raced either a quarter midget or a go-kart. Most started in the SBS or 350 class, or it's very generational, and there were guys like Dave Schulich Jr., Brandon Bellinger, Daniel Connors, Jeff Abold, who all had their dads racing supers at one point or another. So that helps as well when the family ties are so deep here. And like I said, the generational aspect of super modified racing, that sort of helps a lot for guys that haven't been around the cars too much or wouldn't normally have the experience to be able to rely on their dad or their uncle or their grandfather's experience to get in a car and sort of have a mentor right from the jump. We have a special system in place here with all that stuff being said, as well as the local quarter midget and karting tracks.
So you mentioned they were coming out there like logging laps. Do you guys have practice nights throughout the week before the events on the weekends?
Every week during the season, we have what we call Fast Friday, and it's $200 a car, capped at 10 or 12 cars for any driver in any division to come up and practice single car, 10 laps at a time. And I guess the running joke is us asphalt guys, especially super modified guys, always need our practice, and we get plenty of that around here.
Do you guys have any sort of like youth bracket where you guys allow youth racing there? Or is that something that the cars are too fast for kids that age in your guys' opinion for safety?
So, yeah, we do have an age limit. In order to race a super, you have to be 16. You can practice at 15. The SBS, they allowed 15-year-olds to get behind the wheel of those cars. And I actually got special permission to practice mine when I was 14. So if you have extensive go-kart or quarter midget experience, things like that, the owners have been willing to work with certain drivers about at least getting seat time by themselves. They are pretty strict on the 15-year-old age for the SBS and 16 for the big block supers.
Makes sense.
We mentioned earlier in the conversation, there's probably very few people still hanging around Oswego that have been there longer than Kip has. And one of those is Roy Sova, the voice of Oswego. He's been there for over 50 years. So I want to talk about how he's helped to grow the track. And I hear that he's still announcing there today.
I hope so. Cam, he's going to be there this coming season, right? As far as you know?
Yep.
Guys, I will tell you, honest to God, the first time we went to Oswego, which, as we've all determined, was a long time ago, Roy Sova sounds the same today that he did the very first time I went to Oswego 50 some odd years ago. And my understanding, for a very long period of time, Roy Sova lived in North Carolina, flew up or drove up every Saturday night. I would dare say Roy Sova has probably not missed 5 races at best in the whole 50-year plus career he's had up there. He gets excited. Obviously, he's extremely knowledgeable. I think he's a tremendous representative for the sport. And his sidekick, Joe Murata, has been there almost as long as Roy has. We all have tracks that we go to, and you have announcers that just have a rhythm, and they work well together. That's Joe and Roy at Oswego. But honestly, Roy has not missed a beat in 50 years. He's just a tremendous ambassador for the sport.
Roy Sova and super modified racing are synonymous. I think that he has the best voice out of any announcer in the country. And to be able to continue to hold that title as the lead track announcer, he moved up to the booth in 1980, and he's been the super modified announcer ever since. So that's 43 years, going on 44 this season. But he started as a pit reporter here in 1966. 58 total seasons this year. That's just remarkable.
That means Oswego might be headed to the Guinness Book of World Records, right? Do you know who's ahead of him?
I can't imagine anybody is. I've had that conversation with him a few times. And yeah, I just think the world of him. Listened to him growing up, obviously. And when he does decide to retire, which I hope he never decides to retire, this place will not be the same. I can't imagine sitting in the grandstands here or strapped into the car on the front straightaway and not hearing Roy Sova announce the starting lineup. Phenomenal ambassador for the sport. And people don't realize how lucky we are to have him here.
For Oswego, do you guys have future plans to build like a area for visitors to come see the history of it, such as a museum to be able to have some of the older cars and stuff on display or anything like that?
It's been talked about for a long time. I wouldn't say there's any active plans right now, but I will say the history here is so rich. We have a lot of restored race cars from the 70s, 80s, more in the works, and a few of them are displayed at the Weedsport Museum out by Weedsport Speedway. I think that there's certainly interest in that for the track owners, the fans, a lot of people. It's just, again, coming up with the funding. It's something I would like to see happen for sure. And there's plenty of memorabilia, photos, trophies, race cars to put in there from over the years. That's something that I would love to see happen for the Oswego community down the road.
Does that mean that maybe Roy's announcements are being captured, videos? Is the track already kind of stacking up that sort of, not just memorabilia, but those archives?
Yeah, again, I'm a crazy history buff, so I spend my winters and my downtime going back and watching races from the 70s and 80s and 90s. We actually just had our former pit reporter, Norris McDonald, pass away, unfortunately, here recently. We went back and grabbed some video from Norris announcing in the 80s and Roy working with him. And if there's anything I want as far as video, audio, between Mike Gibson at County Video, Thomas Video Productions, and then way back to Don Bartlett when he started in the 60s and 70s, and he's still filming for Thomas Video today, I can get my hands on pretty much whatever I want. We have great record keeping and statistics here, thanks to Dave Rice and some others, and I try my best to keep those updated today. Awesome track photographers that have been here since the 60s and are still shooting today. The vast majority of them, actually. They're all fantastic. If there's anything I need or anything we wanted to put in a museum or something like that, they would be all for it.
And I agree. It would be awesome to have a Oswego Speedway museum there because of the length and breadth of the number of years the track has run and the number of famous people that have been on that surface. But in the interim, we have the IMRRC in Watkins Glen that's always looking to add to our archives. I mean, we have a tremendous program collection. And while I do not have every Oswego program ever printed, I've probably got 60 or 70% of them that was ever printed.
Wow.
Keep us in mind for that until you guys break ground on a museum.
We'd love to. And you guys had the Sweet 16 down there, I think, too, and maybe one of the Champagne cars. Am I right?
We did. We had Steve Miller's car that had won the King of Wings. It was really early in my tenure there, so it's got to be about 10 years ago. I hope this isn't the kiss of death, but Camden knows what I'm talking about. There was a very iconic car that ran there in the early 70s called the Purdy Deuce because it was number 2. Kind of a short wheelbase car, looked really pretty different from everything else it was running. The cool thing about that car is almost everybody that got in the car won in the car. Bentley, almost more than anybody. There was another guy, Jimmy Winks, who actually won more features. For years, it had disappeared. It was in a warehouse in Buffalo. Everybody thought it's just going to rust away. Nobody's ever going to see it again. Through a series of whatever happened, it has been restored, and Camden can speak to this better than I can because it was on the track. Bentley Warren was behind the wheel, but I'm hopeful that we get the Purdy Deuce on display at the center because I'd love to do a program before the Speedway opens up, like first or second weekend of May before Oswego opens up, on the whole history of the Purdy Deuce and have Bentley there and Dick O'Brien and Roy Sova and just talk about the whole history of this truly, truly iconic car.
That would be very cool and just kind of a moment that just gave everybody here goosebumps, I think, when Bentley took that car out on the track, that classic weekend here back in September. And that won the classic in 1966. And to have it back on the track, classic weekend, after sitting in a barn for 40 years. I think that's how long it was. Still in the hands of the Purdy family who owned it originally. An incredible job done by Doug Holmes and everybody involved in the restoration of that. It was done in a very short time, too, less than a year. And they modernized it, did their research, got all the right parts that they needed to make this happen. And to see Bentley come down the front straightaway in that car, I'm still pretty speechless about it. It's something I'll never forget.
Well, and keep in mind, Bentley Warren is what, 82 or 83 years old, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, Bentley was running competitively at Oswego well into his 60s. If you were to see Bentley now, I mean, Bentley was lapping that thing pretty good when he had it there for Classic Weekend.
Yeah, he was. I still think that he could get in a car and be competitive. It's just certain things that have kept him shied away from that. But to think that he started out in that car and then drove the Indy Roadsters and the first offset cars and then got into an Aero Super there with Extreme Chassis at the end of his career, actually won his first and last wins at Oswego Speedway are 40 years to the very day. He last won here with a top wing in 2006, and his first win was September 17th of 1966. So he's had his story.
That's amazing.
Yep.
So for events such as this that you mentioned, do you guys record them and put them online afterwards, or have an option for viewing live for people that aren't in the area?
Yeah, we have an agreement with Flow Racing going into, I believe, our fourth season with Flow now for a $150 yearly subscription. You can watch all of our events live and then play back the full evening replay from any of our shows from 2021 forward. They do a great job. I think it's the best value in motorsports pay-per-view, that's for sure.
I've always felt this in recent years, especially as it's become more of a presence. Does being able to have access to things like Flow Racing and Race Vision or Dirt Vision, whatever, does that keep more people home, or does that entice people to actually go to the track and hear it and feel it and smell it in person? I think you can make arguments on both.
Yep.
I agree with Cam that it's $150 for the whole season is cheaper than going there, but
You don't get that methanol smell.
Yeah, there's nothing like that smell of race field.
that's for sure, man. If I go to bed after watching a night of Flow Racing, I don't smell methanol and my ears aren't ringing, and I need that. That's a fix. I need it. I'm sorry. Years later, I still need it.
You got to turn the volume up on the TV a little louder.
He just puts the subwoofer under the bed. That's all.
Honestly, if I could bottle that methanol smell up on nights like this, just kind of uncork it a little bit and just get a couple breaths of it. It's a great smell.
See, we talked about this on the Flying Tiger Motorcycles episode. He needs some of their
Flying Tiger
candles.
candle.
Yeah.
I have to put them in touch with them to see if they can do a methanol one, because they do, was it the 2-stroke one?
Yeah, the Motul one. They got a bunch of them.
I have to get them to do a methanol scented candle now.
But anyway, getting back on track, pun intended.
Okay, so do you guys have any intentions to like repave in the future, or just leave it as it is because it's holding up well, or, you know, expanding it? What plans are there?
I don't think there's going to be any plans to repave the entire surface. Everyone here is in agreement that if we do that, it would just end up a bit too fast.
I've always been curious as to when the last time the track was entirely repaved. The drivers say it's better when the track is older and there's more age and grippier and all that stuff. But do you have any idea when the entire track was last repaved?
I've been told the early 70s, so it's been a long, long time.
So it's got a lot of patina.
A lot of grip. So that's kind of interesting because tracks don't stay static. I mean, even road courses go through evolutions. The IR just got repaved. New Jersey Motorsports getting repaved. Watkins Glen got repaved a couple of years ago. Eventually, it just all sort of breaks down. And with repaves come changes sometimes in the configuration of the track. VIR, specifically, when Oak Tree came down, they decided to widen the turns because it made it more inviting for IMSA to come there and run.
That being said, if Super Dirt Week continues to be held here for many years to come, we've laid down so many patches at this point that before it's over with, the entire track is going to be repaved over time and not all at once. So I think the good thing is our new patches that we have put down, and there's been some really large areas of the track that have been repaved. They've held up perfectly. And then some of the older pavement continues to come up. And again, some of the patches are really big. Half of the front straightaway is completely repaved. I don't know if people realize that, but it's funny how it's worked out with Super Dirt Week and everything. I think it's actually worked out in the best way possible, because I don't know if there was any other answer as far as repaving it other than to patch it, because I just think if you did it all at once, it would be, quite frankly, deadly fast, just too fast. So it's kind of working itself out.
So if someone's planning to come visit Oswego for a race or a tour, what are some things they should know before coming, like fees, amenities, restrictions?
One of the coolest things that we do here and have done for a long time is that kids 16 and under free with paid adult. I think that's great. We need to continue to get the younger audience involved and interested in these cars.
I think it's amazing you guys allow 16 and younger in free with an adult, because most places they have to be like 8 or 10 to get in for free. So I really commend you guys for doing that to allow the teenagers in.
We have camping available every weekend. You can pay a weekend fee or a season fee, full electric hookup down right on Albany Street in front of the track. And other than that, no crazy fees or restrictions. We do have a lot of cool amenities. I feel like here at the racetrack, we have a tiki bar where you can sit inside there and enjoy the live broadcasts of the race. All of our concessions are leased out to local restaurants. We try to go with the local favorites, and food here is great. It's very affordable for a regular race night. Admissions anywhere from $15 to $20. We also had a $5 night last year. We're working on some specials perhaps with some of the local businesses that are going to offer discount tickets for 2024. All good stuff to keep in mind there.
So, Kip, how are the hot dogs?
It's been Hoffman hot dogs since the day I first started going up there, and mercifully they're still there. Love Hoffman hot dogs and tremendous haddock sandwiches, which are my new favorite. You don't go to the races looking to cut calories, but I agree with Camden. The food's great, very reasonably priced. Got to get a Hoffman hot dog. That's part of the whole thing. You sit there, watch a couple heats, watch practice, watch qualifying, whatever. Go down, get your food, come back up, watch the features. That's the whole evening. People got to go.
How many people can you guys seat for an event?
Probably somewhere between 10 and 12,000, isn't it?
I wanted to say
If
10.
both grandstands are full.
If both grandstands are full, I do believe it's around 10, but I don't want to just throw a number out there. We've never been at capacity for Super Dirt Week yet. We've had very good crowds front end, especially the back grandstands have been nearly completely full.
Back in the old days when I was going for Classic Weekend, the Canadians all sat in the back grandstand. The U.S. folks sat in the front grandstand. They'd play the Canadian national anthem. Everybody would sing. Obviously, the back grandstand was louder than the front. Same thing when they played the U.S. national anthem. Great days. Racing in general doesn't draw those crowds because there's many more things for people to do now. But in those early days when we were going, the place was more times than not, especially for Classic Weekend, which is the big final event, the place was packed. It was so exciting. They'd run a 200-lap modified race on Saturday night and then the 200-lap super race on Sunday. And it was just, I mean, for the race fan like me, it was just heaven. It's just great.
You mentioned like the heats and then the main event. For those of our listeners that aren't familiar with it, that are used to other disciplines, like how many laps is a normal heat race? And then what does your main event last for?
For the SBS Small Block Super Class, we typically do 10-lap heat races and a 30 or 35-lap feature. The 350 wing super heats are also 10 laps, and then a 30-lap feature. The Supermodifieds, 12-lap heat races, and a 50 or 75-lap feature, depending on the program. And then our International Classic on Labor Day weekend is actually 200 laps. So that's our big long distance race.
Camden and Kip, we've reached that part of the episode where I like to ask our guests any shout outs, promotions, or anything else you'd like to share that we didn't cover thus far.
Just to show you how much I love this track, when I first met my now wife, I had tickets for the Classic. She was in Hawaii. She was going to come home, but her plane was going to arrive in time so we could go to the Classic. Well, things got messed up. 6-hour time difference. Her plane wasn't going to arrive until after the Classic. So I found myself standing in front of the grandstand as they're warming up for the Classic, selling my Classic tickets. And I'm thinking to myself, gosh, I've never gone with anybody I would have sold Classic tickets for. So I guess I really must be in love with this woman. And it'll be 44 years this year.
Congratulations.
That shows you how much I love my wife. Does that show you how much I love Oswego? That's kind of a weird thing. But anyway.
So for all of our listeners, that's a sign when it's right for you. When you're going to get rid of things.
Appreciate you guys having me on and giving us the opportunity to talk all things Oswego Speedway and Supermodifieds, and just the Tracy family for continuing to keep this place alive and allowing me to come here and do the PR stuff and have fun with that, but also very fortunate to be able to race here on a weekly basis, and love to come back on anytime and do this again.
I'm so happy that you gave us the time to do this. I'm really not kidding here. I loved Oswego the very first time I went. I've been going there for 50 some odd years. I still get excited on the drive up, and I have a 2-hour drive each way to get there and come back. It's just one of my favorite places. And for your listeners or viewers, if you are a road racing fan, you got to come to Oswego and try a short track Supermodified race sometime. If you're a short track fan who has never been to Oswego, then you can't call yourself a short track fan until you come to Oswego. I just think the place is magical. I say that in all candor, and I'm just very happy that you guys are giving us the time to talk about it. Camden, thanks so much for carving out the time to do this. So happy we had a great representative like yourself for the Speedway.
Thanks, Kip. I appreciate
We want
that.
to see those grandstands filled every week.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Oswego Speedway is now in the hands of the Torres family, which have a long history of both owners and drivers. The biggest weekend of racing during the year at Oswego is the Budweiser International Classic held annually on Labor Day weekend, arguably the most famous open-wheel short track event in the country. The race began in 1957 and annually brings together the best in open-wheel asphalt racing to compete for thousands of dollars in prize money and the right to be called Classic Champion. To learn more about or plan your visit to Oswego Speedway, be sure to log on to oswegospeedway.com or follow them on social media at Oswego Speedway on Facebook and X.
Camden and Kip, I can't thank you guys enough for coming on Break Fix and sharing your stories of Oswego Speedway, educating us on the history. And you know what's gotten me so excited about this is I love learning about new disciplines of motorsport. And this is another stone that we've turned over. And now I'm going to have to do a deeper dive on. But like Kip said earlier, I got to get me some of this methanol and ear ringing and hot dogs and all sorts of stuff. So next time I'm in the area, Kip, we're going to Oswego, man. This is going to be fun.
I'm going to take you up on that. I'd love to take you up there for Saturday night. Seriously.
I think that's a plan. With that, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
We hope you enjoyed another awesome episode of Break Fix Podcast, brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or get involved, be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at Grand Touring Motorsports. And if you'd like to learn more about the content of this episode, be sure to check out the follow-on article at gtmotorsports.org. We remain a commercial-free and no annual fees organization through our sponsors, but also through the generous support of our fans, families, and friends through Patreon. For as little as $2.50 a month, you can get access to more behind-the-scenes action, additional pit stop minisodes, and other VIP goodies, as well as keeping our team of creators fed on their strict diet of Fig Newtons, gummy bears, and Monster. So consider signing up for Patreon today at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. And remember, without you, none of this would be possible.